now starts yapping.
Yeah.
Okay, so you feel like his music is just literally yapping, throwing shades here and
Telling
there.
truth to power.
Okay.
Telling them what the average journalist will not tell them. Telling them the average Nigerian who is always playing safe. I don't want that, I don't want wound, will say, I'm a Gasar. So, yeah. So he was bold enough to say things that ordinarily nobody would feel comfortable saying. And I think the thing really hit the government at the time, and he paid price for it.
Yeah.
His Kalakuta was burnt. His mother was killed. But virtually everything he said then happening today. One of the evergreen ones that is not very popular is Odo. Overtake, don't overtake, you overtake. I was just talking about inflation. Somebody saved money to buy fan. By the time he finished saving money, he priced the fan today, saved money. When he went there, the price has gone up. That's what is happening in Nigeria today. That's one of the evergreen. Sorrow, tears, and blood. I can go on and on. So
let me pick up from afrobeat, afropop, and all of that. So Fela, probably the greatest musician ever to come out of Nigeria, maybe even Africa.
Yeah.
Okay. His style of music, which should not be confused with afrobeats. Fela's music was afrobeat without the S. Actually, Ice Prince claims that he was the first to originate, not originate in the sense of come up with, but whose music was first labeled and branded as afrobeats with an S.
okay.
2011, his song Oleku with Brimo. Okay, when it was to be played on BBC, and they had to label the song, they couldn't label it Afrobeat. Like he said, it doesn't sound so much like Afrobeats. So he suggested the S that added, the DJ added an S, so it became Afrobeats. So Ice Prince and Brimo's song, Oleku, was actually the first song to be labeled Afrobeats in Nigeria. Okay, so then Whiskey and every other person who came after and say they sing Afrobeats, different from Afrobeats without the S. Okay, now Afropop, Afrofusion, like what's his name now? Burna Boy calls his own version. My Oga here is like, what they sing is not Afrobeat. I agree. Yet, I disagree. Let me explain. So Fela's song, because he actually, let's talk about the history of Fela's songs. His music, I mean. So Fela studied music, funk, jazz, high life.
Yeah, he was initially a jazz.
Exactly what he started, which is what he also alluded to. Like what the whites can relate to most in his music is the arrangement. He had this complicated, very extra music arrangement. Okay, that was even, and of course, his people who was mimicking were James Brown and co, the early founders of funk and pop. Is why Fela also has a lot of antics on stage, just like James Brown. Okay, we'll come back to the antics. Yeah, so his music is actually a blend of pop, funk, and traditional Yoruba music. So Fela's music is not pure pop, funk, or jazz, or high life, but it also has deep roots in traditional Yoruba music. So it is essentially a fusion, which brings me to current Afrobeats music singers. What they do is also a fusion between Afrobeat, Fela's Afrobeat, or should we say traditional Nigerian music, and hip hop, which still qualifies their music as Afrobeats.
Yeah.
Well, with the S now.
Yeah.
With the S, I accept. With the S, I accept. I accept.
Yeah, so that's Fela. And of course, you cannot remove the activism, you cannot remove the social commentary from Fela. Okay, I believe in Nigeria, West Africa, Fela originated using music to speak to power. Well, I mean in current recent times. Because if you go back to Yoruba history, Anyon, those who beat drums, were people who, like the jesters in Old English, who could use comedy and stage play to speak to power. Anyon, musicians traditionally, Yoruba tradition, speak to power with their music. They beat the drum to tell the king and people in power what to and what not to do. For example, the Oni of Ife is not expected to eat outside of his palace. So if we're to attend an event and food was served, and you would have they have a drum to remind him that kings don't eat outside. Should he have forgotten? So it's part of Nigerian Yoruba culture to constantly use music to speak to power. Probably that is how Fela, that's what he picked from the traditional Yoruba music when he fused it with Western music, such that he brought in the speaking, using music to speak to power vis-a-vis activism. It is fun fact. I don't think most people know that Fela used to sing love songs.
Yes, he did.
Fela started off as a ballad love song guy before he moved to US, met Black Panthers, and he imbibed activism, added that to his music, and came back home, and then the abyss started.
So one would think the way you're talking about Fela, you personally knew this man.
We party. Yeah, Fela will go way back.
So I'm going to go to the music guru in the house for him to say a little thing about what he knew about Fela, or what he knows through history about Fela.
In short, I would touch on three things. I hope I remember my points. The first one being that as a record producer, there's a perspective with which we see music. When I heard you talk about Fela, I could tell that you grew up in the age where Fela was a movement. It was a major movement. And from a producer's perspective, we see it as the consumers. Okay. You understand?
No problem.
Yeah, because the job for a musician in this era is to satisfy people emotionally, whether it is through a purpose or through your just enjoying the musicality of the instrument. You talk about the instrumentation, the intro, 15 minutes play and everything. You're already in tune with those things. I mean, there are other perspectives to those things.
You can't do that now.
Yeah. I'm talking about, like, I don't want to use spirituality, but like there's some...
Yeah, music is spiritual.
Music is spiritual, you understand? Because spirituality in the sense that, okay, let me use science. Everything is in frequency. Everything is vibrating at a particular frequency. It sounds like physics, but that's not that deep. If you pluck a string on a guitar, it's vibrating. And then if you hold it on different frequencies to change pitch, some are higher, some are lower. So that is it vibrating at different frequencies. So you put different frequencies together, is what makes music. Your voice is one instrument. Fela was an incredible musician. He was blessed with the gift, obviously. When you study music, what you study, like we were talking before we started recording, is not what makes you a musician. It's what you do afterwards. Your study is just leverage. It puts you on the level of, okay, you are in the level play now. Everybody can do what they are doing. If you study music, 200 people study music, they can play piano like you. But your creativity, the ability to make that thing into something unique, is a whole different ballgame. So Fela had that. And that was incredibly,